If you want to raise your hand and maybe identify yourself and where you're from and to whom you want to ask the question, that would be great.
Thanks a lot. Armin, it's a question for you, actually. Great talk, and I got the sense from your talk that kind of one of the strengths of your service is that tailored approach and that one-to-one in-depth expertise. I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on how you might scale that up going forward if demand grows for it.
So I think scaling is not something that is really possible here because the funding calls are sometimes fairly specific. So it is more about deciding what the threshold is to do a tailored training session. So how many people interested in that call do you need to do something tailored? But if I say tailored, it's not something where I sit ages in my office preparing a training session. It is more about doing the same stuff that I do anyway, and the only difference is taking the examples from the call. Yeah, it's not, the effort is not that huge to do that. So the big difference is that I tailor whom I ask to attend. So, and that I can only do with the research office. Yeah, so it's more about they are saying, yeah, I have 20 people that have registered their interest in that call, and I say, brilliant. Yeah, 20 people. If 15 of those show up, that's a brilliant session. Yeah, so and also the other things like the consultation. There's no real room for scaling things up. Yeah, it's yeah. So I assume that if we are really successful with that going forward, we at some point would need to hire more people to work with that. Yeah.
That's great. Thanks, Anne.
But this is something where funding comes into the university. So hopefully there is room to fund that if we are successful. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Go on, Joanna. Thank you. Thank you very much, Joanna Archibald from TUS Midlands. Picking up on Michelle's question there for Armin, and then maybe one for Cillian as well. Armin, I really liked the progression that you talked about there, and I know the language you were moving from this idea of supports into partnership. Really, really like that. My question then is, you know, did you have to sell that in any way, or this idea of seeing the library as partners in this, is the vision on that in the long term that library could be kind of not just supporting with grant applications, but actually kind of co-partnering on them, if you like, and that some of the grant funding could be coming in the library direction, and that library staff would be actually getting more involved in it. So I'm really interested to understand what that partnership in the longer term looks like. And then maybe for Cillian, brilliant work and congratulations to colleagues on the network. Can I ask what the connection is to maybe some of the other groups, say the LAI group on open scholarship? Is there connections to some of that sort of stuff as well? Thank you both, and all speakers.
Yeah, so to the question about the selling the library as a partner, this is something that we haven't widely discussed yet. It's more something that I'm trying to think about if that is actually a good idea or not. So, of course, the driving idea behind that is that funders say you can ask for money for data curation, for example, or you can ask for money for publishing open access and all that. So, and usually what I now say to people is, no, these are all free services that we provide because we want to support open access. Yeah? And that's fine and it works and so on. So, however, wouldn't it be great to access that available funding and get something there? But in order to do that, we need to cost it and we need to put some numbers to it, and we need to actually put that into the grant proposals. And I know that other universities have started doing that a little bit with hiring people, maybe data stewards, who are available to be partners in such projects. So, and we don't have experience with that, but we're very interested in that, so that's why I'm asking if somebody has experience in that, and I would be very interested in exploring this.
Well, I'll try and answer the question about connections with other groups. I think some of the members of our network would be in other groups as well. I think the question would be connections with other groups as well that we're all involved in, like North and other groups like that as well. What are the official connections and ties? In terms of the specific group that you asked, I'm not sure, because I personally haven't too involved in the group. But I know some people. I know it's a good question. I think it's something that we have spoken about. I have no answer for it, to be honest. Obviously, there's no official governance kind of interconnection between them, except for just, I suppose, people during the meetings will generally communicate what's going on. So, but unless anyone else from the network wants to talk on that, if they're involved, for example, more involved on the LAI side.
Well, I might chip in there myself because I'm involved in both the Digital Scholarship Network, but also the LAI Open Scholarship Group and also the LAI Publishing Group as well. So I suppose we would, have a recognition of what each individual group does, and there is a kind of a synergy between them insofar as one group will reflect and promote what another group will do and will support each other's events. So I suppose there is that leverage to be gained from each group sort of being aware of what the others are doing and promoting that. Obviously the memberships of each of those groups might be slightly different, and the Digital Scholarship Network, I guess, is very much focused on creating the roadmap for digital scholarship. It wouldn't be a piece of work that the other groups would necessarily be doing, but they'd be aware of as time goes by. So I guess in that sense there's a light partnership, if you like, between them all. I see a hand raised over this side.
Thanks. Hi, Andrew Simpson from RCSI. I'll do two questions as well if I can. First, Armin, at RCSI we do get people to put funding into their grant applications towards fair data support, which goes towards the library's research data post. We've done that through necessity, really, because we wouldn't otherwise have a research data post, but we have had some success with people being open, depending on the funder, to putting in a kind of flat rate approach at the moment to their grant application in order to get fair data kind of expert support from that. So I'm happy to chat to you more about how we've done it. I think longer term there's still questions for us about how we develop that and coming up with better models for how the level of support people might need and how we kind of make that sustainable longer term. My second point was to ask a question to Christopher, really, just around, you've obviously had a huge success with that journal for going for so many years, and being so well established. Is it a model that has spread at all? Are there other journals that locally or in the same sector that have kind of copied your approach and had similar success?
Last count, I know of 8 journals that specifically used our model to develop their own, going back about 6 years or so now. It's fairly common for folks in a variety of fields to reach out to us to ask how we do things. So yeah, we're proud of that. Thank you.
Do you want to address the first question?
Yeah, so I didn't quite get the question, sorry.
Well, it's more a comment than a question,
Yes,
so
yeah.
just that we do have experience of co-funding in a fairly crude way, but it is having some success and people are open to it, largely by being told to do it, but still it's a first step.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? Sorry, the light is quite bright here, so I might see a hand if it's over that side.
Hi, I'm Kasia. I'm from the NLI. I've got a question for Christopher. Where is the future of an open access journals in the context of universities being commodified and the tendency of turning them into like more for-profit organizations? So what, you know, I see the kind of the value clash there. And
yeah, so good question. I like to think, so I sold our little experiment as a community and values-based experiment. And I like to think that we are reflective of our greater community. Now, that's not just the information literacy community, but more generally the libraries community. And there's no question that corporate interests are taking over higher education. No one can deny that. However, I think that we can stand our ground and we can grow from our little corner, and I think that we have demonstrated that it can be done, it can be successful, and when people see success, then we can build from there. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a question at the front here? No?
Hi, thanks everyone for their talks. I suppose I'm doing the worst thing of this is a comment more than a question, but just to speak, I suppose, both to what Christopher has been talking about and what Armin has been talking about. I'm a member of the LAI publishing group that is focused on library publishing specifically in Ireland. It's something that is already active. There is a community out there. I'm also a board member on the Irish Open Access Publishers Board. So there is a community there that we are trying to centre within the library. And actually one of the ways that has connected us to researchers is the fact that we can publish journals, and it has become actually a sort of a tool for pedagogy as well. We set up the International Undergraduate Journal of Health Sciences about 2 years ago. And we got that through a joint fund that we applied to with our biological sciences department. They came to us asking how to write a textbook, and it morphed into us together writing a grant proposal for an undergraduate journal, which we did, and it continues to grow, and it's very much student-led. So I suppose from my perspective, if you do have a budget or a resource where you can produce journals, or you can produce something that a researcher needs for their grant, and they're aware of it, that's where the opportunities seem to be for us at the moment anyway. Thanks.
Yep, that's great. Thank you.
Can I just add a comment onto that? Of course. Yeah, I suppose it's just more kind of making the comment more generic. You know, we're talking about open journals, but I suppose, and tying into the vision that Chris said this morning, you know, I suppose if we looked at all institutional content journals, all type of publishing, and if every institution, you know, took back control of their own content and published out their content, and then just worked out the hard work of being interoperable, it would be solved. I know that's very easy to say, but I suppose that's what I was thinking this morning. I suppose I've had thoughts like that as well, and that just your talk this morning just kind of just brought it all together. So, thank you. Oh.
Yeah. So, by training I'm an archivist. And the difference between libraries and archives was traditionally that archives have the unique stuff and libraries have the stuff that you can get everywhere. So, and with the digital shift, that changes, yeah? So we are now, of course we still have the published stuff that can be gotten everywhere, but more and more of our work is about stuff that is unique in the sense that we are the ones responsible for creating it as a university, for example. So this means that publishing is taking care of that unique material that our institution is producing. So, and from my point as research data manager, it is not just the peer-reviewed article that we need to take care of, but all the research results. So, and that could then open up the discussion about how do we take care of the educational resources, the research data sets, and so on. So how do we organize peer review altmatrix around that? So I think we are at the cusp of a real change of that whole publishing landscape. Yeah? And there's a lot of things that we need to figure out to get there. Yeah? So.
Thank you. I see a question from the floor.
Thank you to the panelists. I think you all just kind of answered the question I was about to ask, which kind of sits between everything the three of you have just said in your last responses, is, are we making a mistake thinking about journals? Should we be thinking about research outputs? Should we be thinking about open research and open scholarship? Are we playing the publisher's game when we talk journals? That's not really where the open agenda really is anymore. If we're thinking about open research, we're talking about research data management, we're talking about open data, we're talking about reproducibility. Perhaps we should bury the journal and stop trying to play that game against the evil empire and others and think a different way. I'm not sure if that was a question or a statement, sorry.
So I'll jump in there first. So totally agree with you. When I use the word journal, so CIL is a journal. When I use that word, I try to use it in a way that is familiar to everyone. When we first started CIL, when we first developed it, we wanted to take advantage of all of the scholarship that was being produced and to have a platform for for that full body of work. And as just one example that comes to mind right now, our very first issue back in May of 2007, we published as one of our articles an interview. It's a live interview. That's one of our research papers from that issue. So completely agree with you. Things need to change. We need to think about things differently, but for the time being, the word journal is something that people understand, and I think we can build from that.
So if I think about the concept of the journal for scholarly communication, I think there is one very good aspect and one bad aspect. So the bad aspect is, of course, if we measure the impact of the journal and then somehow say the impact of the journal has something to do with the impact of the individual article. So of course we need to measure the individual article and not the journal. So however, the good thing about the concept of the journal is that this is a vehicle where we can organize the peer review around. So in regard to data sets, we see the emergence of data journals for exactly that purpose. Yeah, so now the peer-reviewed item is the data set and not the classical journal article. But it's called a data journal because it works in the same fashion. So, and as long as, and a journal wouldn't necessarily need to be something where you bundle things together in one place and publish that quarterly or so. Yeah, a journal could be something where you publish as soon as the peer review is done.
More fluid.
Yeah, fluid. So, yeah, and I wouldn't know a way of organizing. So if we find another way of organizing the peer review, then of course we might not need that vehicle of journals. But yeah, so far it's a proven concept and works.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Yes.
Just one more comment. Just reflecting on what Stuart was saying and what the panel's been discussing, kind of the power for change in my mind is with the authors, basically, and the researchers, and you know, they're, in our institution anyway, still very wedded to journals and journal prestige and all those sorts of issues that we're all very aware of. So I think we just need to bear in mind that how far ahead and how differently the library community thinks of these things, then I think it varies a bit by subject area, but in a lot of areas it's still a very traditional kind of view of things. So we can create the tools and create the gateways and the publishing systems to do it other ways, but we need to bring the authors with us and have the incentives for them in doing that. I think there are some incentives out there, but we do need to think about that.
Yeah, we need to provide them with what they need.
I see a hand raised.
Just to follow up on that, I would argue that the first conversation is with HR and and the research office, and how this is going. Journals are tied to an academic's progression. If what they put out isn't tied, then it doesn't matter. It's a much larger discussion. Academics will do whatever is going to allow them to continue doing their jobs, that's going to give them a promotion. They're not really tied to the journal, I would say. They're just doing it because they know that's the mechanism to get forward. So let's start there.
I totally agree, and that's the reason why the whole landscape has to change, including the metrics and including the reward systems and so on. So with all these pillars that the EU is putting out. So, and what I found very encouraging, that in the latest calls from the EU, it was explicitly said that journal rankings and impact factors will not be taken into account. Yeah, so explicitly not taken into account. So, and I find that a very encouraging sign that something is really starting to shift.
Thanks very much. Any further comments or questions? Certainly been a very interesting and engaging discussion so far. Oh, I see. Great to see another.
Sorry, I'll get in at the end. I'm Aoife. I'm Quinn Hegarty, sorry. I'm Scholarly Communications Librarian in UCD. I think you're totally right. I think it's a little bit of build it and they will come, but also like you have to get the buy-in and have to meet them where they are. I mean, a lot of academics are crazy busy and have lots of competing priorities, and you know, introducing a brand new publication route can be really unsettling. And I think you're totally right, it has to be reflected in their career progression or in how they evaluate or they are evaluated. So I think it has to be a little bit of kind of leading the way, but also having the space for the advocacy that has to go into that as well.
Yeah, and that is why if we get their attention for the researchers, because they need to write that funding application, that is perfect, because then their usually divided attention is laser focused at that point in time. And yeah, very often I have people coming and saying, oh, now I find out what I have to do now for my funder, and how do I do that? So this is after the fact, then they find out, oh, I can't publish where I usually publish, or can't hide my data sets like I usually do. So, and if we can shift that into considering it before and trying to not just react to funder demands, but actively think about that before and putting that into their proposals, it becomes a strength, because they're not only meeting the demand but also exceeding it, because addressing it and saying we are model open science people, and please fund us. So.
Thanks very much. Any final questions? If not, I might just suggest to the panel if you want to make any closing comments. Yeah.
I would just reiterate my closing line, let's kick some ass together.
And then my closing comment is, I'm in.
Go pressure kill you.
No, I think we said a lot, so I think we said enough. Thank you.
Okay. Well, listen, thanks so much to you all for your discussion.